Darwin's theory propagates that we human beings came into existence through ape. And it is not God Almighty, who created us. It is through the process of evolution humankind came into existence. Science and technology has increased, advanced, but it proves that Darwin's theory is just a theory, it is not a fact. As the subject announced, refutation of Darwin's theory, or Darwin's theory, is it true or false? As most of you must be knowing, what is Darwin's theory in general? Darwin, his theory propagates or tries to make us understand that we human beings, we came into existence through an ape. Our ancestors were the ape, and it is not God Almighty who created us, it is through the process of evolution humankind came into existence. Basically, by this theory, what they want to propagate or present to the world, that God does not exist. God is not the creator of the world. God has not created. It is through natural process, it is through natural evolution that living creatures came into existence, and gradually that particular stage came into existence where human being came into being. Darwin, his full name was Charles Robert Darwin. Charles Darwin, most of us will know or will understand that he was a qualified person, that he must have been graduated in biology or in his science. But the fact is that he was not graduated in his field. He was just a student or amateur in natural studies. He was very much interested in nature. And because of this interest, he happened to be in a ship by the name of HMS Beagle. He took permission from his father so that he could take this travel in this ship, HMS Beagle, which was supposed to take a round throughout the world for 5 years in 1832. And in this ship, when he went traveling in 1832, this ship reached a particular place by the name of Galapagos, an island, and there Darwin noticed finches, a particular type of birds, have different shapes of beaks. At this particular observation, Darwin thought that how is it possible that this species, the finches, belonging to same species, belonging to the same community, they are having different sizes of beaks. So one idea clicked in his mind. He thought for a moment and he said to himself that it is because of natural selection from one generation to the another generation, these sizes of the beak from small beak to the larger beak came into existence. So this is how, for the first time, the idea of natural selection came into his mind, and he made a study over it or pondering over it, and he came to the conclusion that it is because of the natural selection of the qualities in particular species gets transferred to the next generation, and then to the next generation, and then to the next generation, and in a period of time, these accumulation of these qualities reach to such an extent that one species converts into another species. One animal converts into another animal. And in this process, the final stage is that man comes into existence. So it is through one species to another species, from one species converting to another species, this process continues on, and then the final stage reaches and man comes into existence. Please note, he did not do any experiment. He did not go through university. He did not come out with a scientific evidence as such that one species converts into another species. It was his own thinking, his own idea, which came into existence by just seeing the beak of the finches, which was of different size. But with this particular theory and idea, he wrote a book, Origin of Species, in 1859. In 1859, he wrote a book, Origin of Species, giving an idea that it is through the natural selection of the advantageous qualities in one species that converts into another species, another generation, that is responsible for the conversion of one animal, one species into another animal. So he presented this theory of origin of species by the process of natural selection. But please note, when he wrote this book, Origin of Species, he had one particular chapter by the name of Difficulties of My Theory. And in these difficulties of my theory, he himself mentions that my theory has problems to be accepted. Number one, the fossils of the living creatures that are available is not an enough proof to give an evidence that one species converted into another species. So this is the problem. But he hoped that with the advancement of the science, in future, there will be more excavations, more fossils will be available, and then my theory would be hopefully be proved by finding the intermediary fossils which will be linking one species to another species. So he hoped that in future advancement of the science, his theory will be proved. This was one difficulty. Second difficulty, he noticed that certain body parts, certain body organs are so complex that to imagine that it must have come through process of evolution, that is impossible. For example, eye organ or eyesight. This eye has several parts in it: retina, lenses, nerve cells. The whole eye parts, little bit of it, all are responsible for the functioning of the eye. If one part of the eye is not developed, the functioning of the eye will not come into existence. So he said that how is it possible that if eye as an organ, if it is evolving gradually and gradually, it must not have come into existence all at once in the perfect state. So if it comes gradually and gradually, it is impossible, because just one part of the eye, if it is not developed, it will not function. So to imagine eye can come into existence through the process of evolution is impossible. This is the difficulty of my theory. But again he said, with the advancement of science and technology, this difficulty will be proved. This was the second difficulty. And he had the problem of natural instincts. And he could not explain how could it possible that natural instincts could be evolved from one species to another species. For example, what is natural instincts? A child is born. This child is not taught how to suck the mother's milk. This is through the instinct created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The child knows that after he is delivered or it is delivered, he knows how to suck the milk. This is instinct. So Darwin, he thought about the instincts that are available in living creatures. He could not explain how these instincts, natural instincts, could be evolved by the process of natural selection. But all these difficulties that he mentioned in his book, Origin of Species, he was very much hopeful that with the advancement of science and technology in future, because science and technology was not advanced in his time, in future, my theory will be accepted as fact. But science has advanced, but it falsifies his theory. It proves that Darwin's theory is just a theory, it is not a fact. Because in his time, science not advanced, it was not well established. At his time, the microscope could examine just to a greater level of a cock. The cell, which is today explored and examined in the microscope, powerful microscope, at that time he could not. In his age, the cell could not be examined. But just within 50 years' time, Gregory Mendel, he discovered the cell structure of a human body. And he discovered later on the discovery of inheritance and the DNA and the genes and the nucleus and the complex structure of the cell came into existence. With the understanding of the nucleus and the DNA molecules and the genes, that these are the responsible parts which has the master coding of everything of a human being or living creature, it was a big blow to Darwin's theory. Just within 50 years' time, Gregory Mendel, he discovered the cell structure of a human body. And he discovered later on the discovery of inheritance and the DNA and the genes and the nucleus and the complex structure of the cell came into existence. With the understanding of the nucleus and the DNA molecules and the genes, that these are the responsible parts which has the master coding of everything of a human being or living creature, it was a big blow to Darwin's theory. So with this advancement, Darwin's theory crumbled like anything. But still, people who believed Darwin's theory wanted to remain intact and wanted to support this theory. They came to conference and they thought that if this is the case, that coding of the everything is there in the nucleus, and because of the change in the nucleus, then only there can be change in the species, in the animal, because if the nucleus, the genes, the DNA, these things have the coding, and if there is a change in this coding, then only there can be change in the human structure, in the human body. They thought and they came up with an idea that it is because of gross mutations, gross changes in the nucleus that are responsible for changing from one species to another species. It is just amazing. This is again their thinking, their understanding that changes in the nucleus is responsible for the change of one species to another species. But scientifically today we know that changing in the nucleus will not create a better human being or better creature. For example, if you have a complicated watch, in this watch, if you make a random change, it will not improve the watch, it will harm the watch. So random mutation cannot be taken as a criteria for having an advantageous change from one lower species to another species. So again, this theory of random mutation was proved to be false. The fact is that even evolutionists who believe in this theory of natural selection and that one species converts into another species, they go against their own theory. Like Colin Peterson, one evolutionist, he says that till now, not a single species has changed from one species to another species by way of natural selection. So if they themselves admit, how can you say that one species converts into another species? They're also trying to present it the theory of industrial melanism. What is industrial melanism? In England, when there was industrial revolution, before the industrial revolution, the barks, the trees, if they had light-colored moths and the dark-colored moths, the dark-colored moths, the insects, could be easily as a prey and been eaten by a bigger animal. So in the process of time, when industrial revolution did not come into existence, when it did not darken the tree barks, the dark-colored moths was eaten up. So this is how the dark-colored moths was scanty and in minimum quantity. But with the industrial revolution, the color of the barks, the color of the tree was darkened. And because the color of the tree was darkened, the dark moths, dark-colored moths, could be camouflaged and they could not be noticed by the bigger insects and they could be remain there. And in the process of time, the light-colored moths were eaten up. So this is how this natural thing that took place, people who believe in Darwin's theory, they took an evidence and said, see how the light-colored moth converted into dark-colored moth. how one colored moth converts into another color. This is how they prove that Darwin's theory is true. If Darwin's theory was true, biggest fact is that if they claim that one species converts into another species, then definitely they should have intermediary fossils. You do know what is fossils? The remains of the living creatures that are embedded in the earth. If those fossils are excavated, if they claim that one species converts into another species, they should have enough evidence of those fossil record which is in between one animal and the another animal. But the fact is that they do not find the intermediary fossils record. Suppose if they say that the reptiles converted into birds, they must have intermediary animals, the fossil record, which should have half reptile and half bird, at least half reptile and half bird. But they do not find any single species which is in between having half reptile and half bird. So the fossils records today that is excavated, they prove that one species did not convert into another species. Geological evidences that today they have come up, they could dig up to a level of Cambrian strata. They dig up the earth geologically to the level of Cambrian strata, which can be dated from 500 to 550 million years. In this particular strata of the earth, they could find innumerable complex living creatures fossils, the remains of the living creatures. And they could find the fossil record of shark, which could be dated 400 million years back, the fossil record of cockroach, which could be dated 320 million years back. They could see the fossil record of ants, which could be dated 100 million years back. They could find the fossil record of grasshopper, which could be dated 40 million years back. So, Richard Dawson, again an evolutionist, he says, how is it possible that all the complex living creatures, as if they are planted at one time, and it shows no evidence that one species converts into another species? In one particular age, if you have all different complex, small and big creatures, fossils embedded in one strata, it itself is a proof that one species did not convert into another species. They were all at one time. If they were all at one time, the theory of evolution is proved false. So fossils record proves that Darwin's theory is not true. But yet, though they could not substantiate that Darwin's theory could be proved through fossils record, they manufacture fossils record. And for example, how do they do that? In the magazines, in the television channels and different channels, Discovery channels and different video programs, we see the construction of the ape man, as if we are given to understand that these were the creatures which existed. But what is the fact? These creatures did not exist. It is reconstruction of these creatures, ape man. It is reconstruction. What is reconstruction? That if they find one piece of bone, for example, if they find one arm bone in the fossil, based on one arm bone, one hand, they construct the whole human being, the whole ape man. This is construction. If they find one skull, based on one skull, they make the whole body of ape man, signifying that this is the ape man, which is the intermediary between the ape and human being. So they fabricate drawings and construction by just picking up one piece or two pieces of skeleton, and they make the whole structure. Not making just whole structure, they make the wife and children and the whole family, signifying that these are the ape man, half ape and half man. This is forgery. An example of such forgery is that one such thing took place in Piltdown, a certain place known as Piltdown. In 1912, Dr. Charles Dawson, he presented a skull with a jawbone and the skull. And he said, this is the ape man, half ape and half man. And he tried to prove that this will prove Darwin's theory. Later on, Kenneth Oakley in 1949, he made a fluorine testing on this skull bone. With this fluorine testing, he came to know that the jawbone had few or very little or negligible fluorine content. The skull had little more fluorine content. Doing the fluorine testing of the jawbone and the skull separately, it was proved that it did not belong to the same species. But again, Wiener in 1953, through again a further study, proved to the world that the jawbone actually belonged to an ape which has died recently, just few years back, and the skull belonged to a 500 years back a man. So it was the half skull taken of a man and jawbone taken of an ape, joined together and manipulated and trying to prove that this is an ape man. And they had stained it with potassium dichromate to give an understanding that it is backdated of long years back. But once they put in acid, the potassium dichromate finished off. This is one example of Piltdown forgery. Second example is of Nebraska man. Nebraska in America. Again, Oswald Field, he presented that this is the construction of a Nebraska man, which is the ape man, the link between ape and a human being. Based on what? Based on one molar tooth. The grinding teeth behind is the molar tooth. Having this molar tooth, he made a construction of a whole structure, the complete body, head, body, trunk, hand, legs, and the whole structure. Not just whole structure, he made the whole family of this ape man. But later on, the other parts of the skeleton, initially based on one tooth, he made the complete structure. But later on in 1927, the other parts of the skeleton were found of that species. And when it was assembled, they came to the conclusion that the skeleton was not of ape man, it was not of ape, it did not belong to man, it belonged to the wild American pig. So the tooth was of the American pig, died and which got extinct, and based on that, the Nebraska man, half ape man, was presented to the world, trying to prove that Darwin's theory is true. The height of this forgery, you can imagine, that they picked up a pygmy by the name of Otobenga, and they took him saying that even today in this age, in 1904, the half-ape man is existing. In his language, the name of Otobenga means a close friend. He was taken to America. He was present in the fair, St. Louis Fair, before the people that this is the half-ape man, trying to prove the missing link between ape and human being. And he was placed in the museum before the chimpanzees and the other gorillas, and later he committed suicide. So this is how they make forgeries, trying to prove that Darwin's theory is true by manufacturing fossils record. If you imagine logically, with the advancement of science and technology, the molecular biology and genetics that science has advanced, you will come to know that it is impossible for one living cell to come into existence by chance and by evolution. It is just impossible. One living cell, because cell that we have today, which we can imagine and examine today, it is complex to the highest degree. It has refineries, it has laboratories, it has canal systems, pipeline systems, manufacturing systems, cell membrane. It is such a complex, one little cell, which we cannot see with our own eyes. It is such a complex that people have imagined that if you have an advanced city with all its technologies and telegraph system and canal system and telephone system and transportation system and laboratories and technologies, the whole advanced city much, much more complex is a little cell. So it is just impossible that one cell can come into existence all by itself through process of evolution. Not just one cell, if you understand, you cannot see with the naked eye. You can only see one cell through a microscope. It is so small, through a microscope you can see. And this small cell is so complex that you cannot reproduce. You cannot reproduce with all the advancements of science and technology that we have. Just imagine that with all the advancement and science and technology that we are having today, with all this help and intelligence, can we produce one single living cell? And the answer is no. So if it is not possible to make one single living cell with all the advancement and technology today, how can it be possible in ancient period, without any advancement, without any science and technology, all by itself, that this single living cell can come into existence? This is impossible. Not just one single cell, even the parts of the single cell cannot come into existence by chance. The parts of the single cell you cannot see with the naked eye. Of that single cell, the building parts of these single cells are proteins. This protein cannot come into existence by chance and by evolution. Again, proteins, building parts of the cell, but proteins by itself is made up out of amino acids. Not just one protein can come into existence by chance. And the scholars and the scientists and the researchers, they say, just take for an example, one single protein which has just 288 amino acids. Proteins can contain 500, 600 amino acids. I am just taking an example of just 288 amino acids combination protein, which has 12 types of amino acids. In protein, it is proper attachment of the amino acid that is required for a useful protein molecule. If the attachment of the amino acid are not in a proper order, it will not serve any purpose. Useful protein molecule cannot come into existence. So it is through the proper sequence of the amino acids, one protein molecule can come into existence. Suppose there are 288 amino acids just freely. How is it possible that it joins together in a proper sequence, in the one particular sequence that can result into useful protein? The probability, the scholars, they say, the chance of one protein coming to existence is 1 in 1 with 300 zeros. Meaning the figure 1 with 300 zeros, out of that one chance. And the scholars, they say that such a probability, such a chance, if you have, that 1 in 1 with 50 zeros, it should be considered negligible, impossible. So if it has 300 zeros, you can see how impossible it is. If you take one bacteria by the name of hominis H39, it has 600 amino acids protein, and of many more types of amino acids. If it was so difficult and impossible with just 288 amino acids, how it would be impossible with 600 amino acids? Again, another example is given, that if you have normal in human being the protein molecule of having 500 amino acid, and it is explained that 3 things are required. One is the proper sequence of the amino acids joining each other. Second, the amino acids, they have left-handed amino acids and right-handed amino acids. It is the only left-hand amino acids joining together will serve the purpose. If there is one right-handed amino acid joining together, the whole molecule of protein coming into existence will be useless. So again, proper sequence of all 500 amino acids, again, all should be left-handed joining, and all should be with the particular peptide joining, peptide bond. So three things are required. If any of it in these 500 amino acids coming together, if just one is not there, the whole molecule will be useless. So the probability calculated is 1 in the figure 1 with 950 zeros. See the chance, 1 in the figure 1 with 950 zeros. If the scholars, they say that if you have 1 with 50 zeros, it is impossible. How can it be possible that one protein molecule having the chance with 1 with 950 zeros? So just the existence of one protein molecule by chance, scientifically it is established, cannot come into existence. It has to be by the way of creation. And the evolutionists, they present before us 4 types of stages. First is Australopithecus, Homo habilis, and Homo erectus, and Homo sapiens. The evolutionists, they say that human being came in this stage. First it was Australopithecus. Australopithecus is pure ape, monkey. Then from Australopithecus, it changed into Homo habilis. Homo habilis again can be proved a species of an ape, monkey. Then they say that it converted, changed into Homo erectus. Homo erectus, by the name itself, it says that this particular creature started standing on bipedal, on 2 feet. The first two, Australopithecus and Homo habilis, they had 4 legs, 4-footed animal. So the first two, Australopithecus and Homo habilis, they were pure ape. Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, they are the human beings, different species of human being. But the evolutionists, they try to present that these were the stages of ape man. Australopithecus, ape, then it gradually converted to ape man, and then he advanced with Homo erectus, and then with the modern man, Homo sapiens. But when we analyze, it is not so. The first two is pure ape, monkeys, and the last two, Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, they are pure human beings. That human being came in this stage. First it was Australopithecus. Australopithecus is pure ape, monkey. Then from Australopithecus, it changed into Homo habilis. Homo habilis again can be proved a species of an ape, monkey. Then they say that it converted, changed into Homo erectus. Homo erectus, by the name itself, it says that this particular creature started standing on bipedal, on 2 feet. The first two, Australopithecus and Homo habilis, they had 4 legs, 4-footed animal. So the first two, Australopithecus and Homo habilis, they were pure ape. Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, they are the human beings, different species of human being. But the evolutionists, they try to present that these were the stages of ape man. Australopithecus, ape, then it gradually converted to ape man, and then he advanced with Homo erectus, and then with the modern man, Homo sapiens. But when we analyze, it is not so. The first two is pure ape, monkeys, and the last two, Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, they are pure human beings. And the proof is that if you analyze all these stages, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and Homo habilis, and Australopithecus, if you find the fossil record, they are found in existence at one time. So if they can be found at one time, the idea of one evolving from the other is false. Another scientific proof is that the semicircular canals, in the ear you have a balancing system of the body, the semicircular canals in the ear. Taking that as an example, if you find in the Homo habilis and in the Australopithecus, which they claim is the gradual advancement, they have different semicircular canals, the balancing system, because they are four-footed. But in human being, the Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, they have a different semicircular canals, the balancing system, inner ear, which signifies that they are human beings. So you come to know that these evidences that present before, that these are the stages of human being that came into existence in this form, is totally false, is not true. So there are various ways by which we can come to conclusion that Darwin's theory, when he propounded, it was just a theory. It was just his views. It was just his understanding. It was not a research work. It was not a well-documented presentation. It was his just theory, and it still remains a theory. It still remains a theory. It is not yet proved. And there are scholars, great scholars and scientists who speak against Darwin's theory to say that man came into existence through the evolution process is totally false. It is not true. The fact is the same thing which I quoted from the glorious Quran, from Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse number 30, with which I started my talk, which says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. That when Allah, your Rabb, He said to the angels that I am going to create a vicegerent on earth. The angels, they said, قَالُوا أَتَجَّلُوا فِيهَا مَنْ يَفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. Are you going to create such a creature which is going to shed blood and create fasad on earth? وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. We are there to celebrate your praises and glorify your name. Allah replied, قَالَ إِنِّي عَالَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He said, what I know, you know not. So it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who created us. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who created whole universe. It is not through the process of evolution. And I would like to conclude with the saying of Chandra Vikrama Singhe, who is the professor of applied mathematics in America, in American University. He says that to imagine that one single living cell can come into existence from inanimate things, from material things, one single cell to come into existence from inanimate things, it is to say the probability is 1:1 with 40,000 zeros. And previously I said, if you have 1 with 50 zeros, it is impossible. So if you have 40,000 zeros, you can imagine how impossible it is. So Chandra Vikrama Singhe says that this figure is such a huge figure which is enough to bury Darwin's theory and Darwin himself. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Jazakallah, Dr. Shuaib Syed. Now we enter into the most interesting part of the session, which is the question and answer session, in which you are allowed to put forth any question on the topic, which is refutation of Darwin's theory. If there are any non-Muslim brothers sitting in the audience, they would be given first preference. So may we have the first question from the brothers over here? Yes, brother.
What's the Islamic ruling on cloning?
Brother has posed the question that what is the Islamic ruling of cloning? Cloning is developing a living creature out of a living cell. You take one living cell and you develop that living cell with science and technology, and you make one living being, living creature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not, or Quran does not mention anywhere in any verse saying that cloning cannot take place. It does not mention anywhere in the Quran that cloning can take place. So Quran does not mention it. Even if cloning takes place, it is not going to contradict Quran, because Quran does not make any comment over that cloning can take place or cloning cannot take place. But on the other hand, let me explain to you that these are the process of creation of human being. 4 different processes can be presented. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presented all the 4 processes. For example, He created Adam alayhi salam without any human father and human mother. This is one. He created Hawa, Eve, without any mother. He created Jesus without any father. He created Jesus from a single cell. Cloning, what you know, is from single cell. So here you can realize Jesus Christ, he was born miraculously from a single cell. And all human beings from both the cells. So all four types of creation, we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done it. So by cloning, it is not contradicting Islam or contradicting Quran. There is a verse in the Quran in Surah At-Tur, chapter 52, verse number 34, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah is Khaliq who creates things out of nothing. So Allah is Khaliq, and the quality of being as a Khaliq is not just a creator, but it means creator creating out of nothing also. So nobody can claim or nobody can come and prove to the world that he had created out of nothing. If cloning they are doing out of something, and that is out of the living cell, which is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is not contradicting in any way. On the contrary, if you take a way of interpretation, it actually confirms the concept or idea or the principles of Islam. How? If you can imagine now with your advancements and technology that one single cell, if it is preserved, and you can create the whole human being, the whole creature, the whole life can be created of that single cell, is it not possible for God Almighty that after you die, from one single cell out of you, He can create again and resurrect again in the resurrection on the judgment day? So on the contrary, it can prove to you the idea and the concept of hereafter. If you as a human being can do with one single cell and create a living creature, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can very well, He can do, and He can recreate you in the hereafter. So it can really confirm and prove to the non-Muslims. Muslims are confirmed. It is not true for the Muslim. For the non-Muslims who deny the hereafter, they can be confirmed with this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can very well recreate us in the hereafter. So to deny hereafter is against their own science and technology. Can you imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala argues in the Quran that how can they deny the resurrection? How can they deny the next life hereafter? Do they not imagine, do they not realize that who created them first? If the one who created you first, out of nothing, He can very well create you again out of something. I had an experience in my college days. One person, he came up and he said, Muhammad, they used to call me Muhammad, how do you believe that once we die and we are buried and our bones and our flesh, all they are disintegrated, will be again created, will come into life again? How can you believe such false things? So I said, how old are you? He said, 25. Brother, where were you 35 years back? Nowhere. So if you are nowhere, non-existence, 35 years back, and you are created out of nothing, then very well, now at least you are 5 feet, He can create you out of something. So if He can create you out of nothing, He can definitely create you out of something. So the idea of cloning, in fact, confirms the idea of hereafter.
Inshallah, with this, we conclude this session.